So I was assigned the Valley of the Drums, which was described as an uncontrolled waste dump located near Louisville, Kentucky. So, a little background on that. In the 1960s, the dumping of toxic waste drums began on a piece of land owned by A.L. Taylor. So, at the time, there really weren't any laws to regulate the dumping of toxic waste. So, the site went unchecked and apparently unnoticed by authorities for a matter of years before a fire happened on the site that caught the attention of authorities. So, with the site, as far as dumping goes, there's multi-levels to it. So they have the surface drums, which there was, I think they said close to about 20,000 on the surface, full of contaminants just sitting there. And then besides that, they also dug trenches and buried drums and also emptied out drums and burned the chemicals in the trenches. So not only do we have the thousands of drums on the surface, we also have thousands of drums underneath that. Paint a pretty picture for you. So it was said that paint and coating industries in Kentucky were believed to be the primary dumper, besides Taylor himself. And later on, it was found that approximately 140 compounds were identified, including some PCBs, which are very nasty and toxic compounds that lead to health problems and birth defects because if you're exposed to them, it can stay with you for about 15 years. So, leading from that, we're going to go into how it affected the community. So, no one died or was relocated because of the dump, but it was still a nuisance. There are about 5 residential homes and then a country club that were located within, or still are, I think, located within about a few thousand feet of the site itself. So over the years, while it was still active, there were numerous complaints about strong odors that originated from the site, and also due to the contamination from the groundwater from the site, the area's groundwater was unusable for drinking, so many in the area have to use cisterns or public water supply. There's also a creek, which is a recreational creek near the site called Wilson's Creek. It's been tested for water quality. It's been found to have contaminants in it, which is believed to be from storm runoff from the site. So there really isn't a lot of human problems because of it. They said a big reason it wasn't severe for human exposure was because the landscape of the area was not good for development. It was very hilly in the area, so they didn't build businesses or a lot of houses. So that prevented probably a lot of bad things from happening. So, future problem possibly. It said that the chemicals are moving through the groundwater or soil constantly, but very, very slowly. So I don't know if they were doing anything to regulate that. I didn't find anything on it. So what the government did or responded to and programs that were created because of it, it was the site was first identified as a waste disposal site by Kentucky Environmental Services in 1967. Going on that timeline, the first documented release of those hazardous substances from the site happened in 1975. So from there, the Kentucky Environmental Services pursued legal action against Mr. Taylor, but he died in 1977. Now, I don't know, or I couldn't find anything on who owns the property now, but it goes on much longer after his death. So, keeping up with it, in 1979, the EPA first responded to the site. So they surveyed the site and found a lot of stuff wrong, obviously. So from there, they created things like interceptor trenches, and they instated a temporary water treatment system to help prevent runoff into the creek and other areas. And then they also secured and organized the drums on the surface of the site. From there, going into 1980, the Kentucky Environmental Services contacted 6 of the parties they believed to be responsible for dumping. And after that, it looks like those parties removed about 30% of the waste that remained on the surface of the site. So that left about 4,000 drums on the surface, but still a lot underneath. No actual numbers about how much was left underground. So in 1981, the EPA returned to inspect the site again. They discovered that a lot of the drums that were just organized and left on the surface now had deteriorated and were leaking. So they were discharging the pollutants onto the ground, which led to more runoff into the creeks. So they upgraded the treatment system and they removed the remaining surface barrels. But like we said, there's still an unknown amount of waste buried on the site. So as far as the timeline goes, the EPA's cleanup effort began in 1983 and officially ended in 1990, but there were still some issues going on after that. As far as things that were created because of the Valley of the Drums, not officially, but it's believed to have at least taken part in the creation of the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, or shorter, the Superfund Act of 1980. So this act was designed to fund and clean up the waste sites like the Valley of the Drums, so they wouldn't get quite as out of hand as this did, because they said that while they were cleaning it up, it was just too much for that time, what they could handle. But they did remove the remaining barrels on the surface, they disposed of them properly, and recycled the drums. So what's the site like today? And is it still dangerous? And is our non-existent community thriving? Really no community, so not applicable. So what's the site like today? I really didn't find a lot on current stuff. Back in 2008, when the EPA returned to survey the site, they found that more barrels had shown up on the outskirts of the site where they had already cleaned up and fenced off the area. So people were still using it as a dump site. Like I said, I didn't really find anything after that. There was a Google image that was on one of the articles. It looked like a relatively normal area. Green grass. So on the surface it looked fine. Really nothing out of the ordinary, but really you can't say what it's like underground or what the conditions are like underground. So that is the Valley of the Drums.